So we are in a sermon series on parenting and grandparenting in a new world. Things have changed a little bit since I was a kid, since Robert was a kid. And we sometimes can feel intimidated by some of those changes. And so we are going to explore some of those things together. We have explored, the first Sunday we talked about social media and how that has impacted our kids. Last Sunday we talked about gender fluidity and how that impacts our kids. Today we want to talk about information overload, the Google era, and how that impacts our kids. And then next Sunday we are going to have a panel of parents up here to answer questions. And so there's going to be an opportunity for kind of more input from other voices and so on. So if you have a question that you would like us to talk about, maybe it's something about what I've talked about, or maybe it's something completely outside of what I've been able to touch on in the last few weeks, please email it to me or text it to me, and then we will make sure that we get that to all of the panelists so that they can have a chance to process those questions ahead of time. And then we will have a great Sunday next Sunday. So, my great-grandparents homesteaded in North Dakota. And then my grandparents moved up from there to Alberta and homesteaded in Viking, Alberta. How many of you have parents or grandparents or great-grandparents that homesteaded on the prairie somewhere? Yeah, quite a few of you. So it's interesting that when the homesteaders came out this way, a lot of them, when they went to sign the homesteading documents, couldn't actually read or write. They would just put their X on the documents, and that was all that they knew how to do in order to do that kind of business. But the one thing that they all had in common, virtually all of them anyway, was they were very adamant about getting their kids education. And that's why you have all these little country schools, many of them shut down now, that homesteaders built so that they could get a teacher in to get their kids to, be able to do reading and writing and arithmetic and so on and so forth, because they wanted their kids to have more opportunity than what they felt that they had. And I mean, homesteading was a tough go. I mean, my grandparents, they lived in a sod hut for the first winter. Can you imagine living in a sod hut in -30, -40 weather? And they just thought education was a ticket to having a better life. And so it was very, very important to them. And the truth is, lots of the kids from those homesteaders grew up and got better jobs than their parents had. Some of them stayed on the farm, but many of them moved into the city and got, jobs that paid better and had a better standard of living. And often, those kids kind of pitied their parents. Sort of almost a little bit of a patronizing kind of, I'm glad that you did what you did, but we live in a new age, in a better way, we have education now. And so there was this tension there until the kids got old enough that they started realizing that education isn't everything, and that their parents, as hard as they worked, actually had some wisdom that they could really benefit from. Because the one thing that education can't do for you is give you wisdom. It can give you knowledge, but not wisdom. It can give you lots of facts, which can be helpful, and certainly can help contribute to wisdom, but wisdom actually often is hard-earned through tough experiences. I heard somebody say that the way that you make less mistakes is by making more mistakes and learning from them. And so, the only way to wisdom is through making mistakes. Now, in the last 20 years, the amount of information that has become available to all of us, including our kids, has increased, multiplied many times over. Google, let me read you their vision statement. Their goal is to organize all the information in the world and make it accessible to everyone in a usable way. You think about that. All the information in the world. And one company is trying to manage that for us. And lo and behold, they actually are achieving their goal. Lo and behold, we are gaining access to more and more information, and the amount of information in the world is multiplying as well. And all of a sudden, those of us that didn't care about all kinds of different things, all of a sudden we are Googling that. And in our family, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but they're sitting on the front row, we have a Google queen. And almost every conversation, I'm going to Google that. Because we just have access to so much information now that we never had before. We just get curious. I could probably find that out. I mean, 20 years ago, you had to drive to the library, you had to go through this complicated process and then look in an old-fashioned book and look through page after page until you'd find that information. Now you just touch a few buttons and wham, there it is. And then you figure it out. And so we now are processing way more information than what we used to do. And at the same time, we've also become more mobile. And we are now moving around globally much more than we used to. We hop on planes and go to different parts of the world. And not only that, we get on the internet and go to other parts of the world way more than we used to. So we can now go to Google Maps and actually see Street View, and we can see exactly what it looks like where somebody on the other side of the world lives. And we've never been there, and yet we can actually have almost a first-hand experience of being there. And this has led to, when we were kids in school, if you were an academic type kid and you were competing to be best in the class, you were often competing with, Susie across the street, who was the brainiac and always got straight A's, and you were trying to beat her on exams. But it's not like that for our kids anymore. Our kids now are actually competing globally with all the kids in the whole world. And academic scores are compared between nations, and our kids are competing for jobs internationally. I have a good friend who works for Husky, and Husky, the division that he is in, was bought out by the Chinese. And one of the things he noticed was that he started getting emails in the middle of the night. And he didn't get up to answer his email in the middle of the night. And they would be frustrated with him in China because he didn't answer quick enough. And he at first thought, well, maybe it's just the time change thing, until he started looking at the time that they were sending the emails. And they were sending the emails in the middle of the night China time. And this is the new world we live in. They don't live in the same rhythms as we live in. And so there's global competition, and our kids face pressure to perform in school already at young ages that we didn't face. This has led to, for example, high school courses are now being taught in middle school. And university level and college level courses are now being taught in high school. Any of you that have high school students, how's that going for you, mentoring them in math? You look at the math they're doing now in high school, it's certainly not like the math that I did in high school way back in the last millennium. And same thing with English and all of these different subjects. They are way more advanced than what we were as we were kids. And all of this comes back to the global competition and global community that we are now part of. And parents used to be able to control and understand a lot of the information, most of the information, maybe even all of the information if they had a good education, that their children were processing as they grew up in their home. But that age is gradually disappearing, or the age at which you can understand everything that your kids understand is getting lower and lower, if you will. Let me just ask you a question. If you have a technical issue with something electronic in your home, like a computer, do you go to the oldest person in the house or to the youngest person in the house? See what I mean? Our kids are often understanding things better than we do because of the environment that they grow up in. And so how do you deal with this? I mean, you used to be able to parent in a convincing way as our kids got older because you had more and better information than they did. You know, you would be able to logically show them why your way of seeing things was better just through giving them more information. Now you're in a position where your kids actually probably have the information you're trying to give them already and more. And they could probably give you counter arguments and well-documented information to counter everything you say. And so you are in a different kind of parenting environment than you used to be. I've met parents who take the attitude in that, well, if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my kids. You know, if I used an old-fashioned counting machine when I was a kid, they can use that too. Forget this computer stuff. But folks, we all know that that really does not work. That can actually be very detrimental to your kids to take that attitude. We need to empower our kids to live in the time that they do. And the truth is, doing that can easily make us feel pretty intimidated. You can feel like a fish out of water when you're trying to walk with your kids and they are working or learning in a world that's very, very different than what we're used to. And so the interesting thing is we also live in a world where our younger generation has started to question truth. And so you have a term that has developed in the last 10 years called my truth and your truth. And so your kids easily can counter your arguments with, well, that's your truth, but this is my truth. How do you deal with that? When truth can be so moldable and flexible that my truth can be different than your truth. That leaves us in a very challenging situation. So I want to look at a passage in Ephesians. Ephesians is a little letter written by St. Paul. St. Paul was one of the early leaders in the church that gave a real clear sense of guidance to the church. He was an intellectual, highly educated, but he really understood that where the rubber hits the road. He was not married and didn't have children, but he addresses the family situation here and gives some clear direction. So this is chapter 6 and the first 4 verses. And there it says, "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on the earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." So we see Paul here addressing both the children and the parents. So, first of all, Paul affirms that it's a good thing for children to follow the lead of their parents. That's always been a good thing for children. When children start to rebel and start to figure that they can do things on their own, it always goes poorly. And interestingly enough, that has always been an issue in families. We often believe that, rebelling against your parents started in the 60s and, basically has derailed since then. But the truth is, it's always been an issue. Even when you read ancient literature from the 500s or the 300s, you see parents exasperated by their kids wanting to go their own way. So this tension is not a new thing. But it is better for children to follow the lead of their parents. Now, he also turns his attention to fathers. Now, in order to understand this, you need to understand the culture of the day that Paul is speaking into. In that day, fathers had absolute control over their children, especially their sons. Right up until they were adults, into their 30s and 40s, fathers controlled everything about their children's lives. How many of you are thankful you didn't live back then? Yeah. Can you imagine 40 years old answering to your father and he's saying, okay, now I want you to do here, this and that and the other thing. Here's your to-do list for today. Oh, man. That was the reality of the culture of that time. And so Paul speaks into this culture and says, fathers, don't, and the Greek word here literally means don't exasperate your children. So be kind, be generous, be flexible with them, be, believe in them, be gracious with them. This is what he's saying. Don't try to control them or force them to do things that are exasperating to them. So this is the message that he's trying to convey. And this is really the part of this that would have been shocking to the people that he was writing this to. It's even hard for us to imagine how they would have just been going, whoa, what do you mean don't exasperate my kids? That's my prerogative as a father. And he says, no, don't go there. And the interesting thing is that this dynamic between parents and their kids often feeds off of each other. When kids start to get to that age and some get there much sooner than others, where they feel like they need to exert a little bit of independence, it often really intimidates parents, and control is often the response that parents give to feeling intimidated. So when we feel like, whoa, 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 don't do like this, we often clench onto our kids and try to control everything that's going on with them. And so when Paul is addressing fathers here, that's really the dynamic that he's addressing. He's saying, don't respond to your kids wanting to grow up with trying to control more. That's not healthy. That's not helpful. And sometimes, let's face it, when our kids are exerting pressure to push us, we can start to feel pretty uptight, pretty out of control. And not our best parenting moments don't necessarily happen when you feel like that. And sometimes the best first move when you're feeling like that as a parent is to just give yourself a timeout and calm down. Because sometimes when we react to our children in the heat of the moment, that initial reaction is not the best parenting we could give. And so when we back off, let ourselves calm down, it helps us to gain a sense of inner control, which helps us then to be able to manage the situation better. And so Paul here says, don't exasperate your children, but rather bring them up. And literally that word in the Greek language that he uses means to nurture your children. So nurture them instead of controlling them. What does nurture mean? Well, actually, nurture means to lead with love. So as parents, we're called to abandon the control and lead with love. Now, that's not as simple as it sounds. Every parent loves their children, let's face it. Unless you're a sociopath, you love your children. And every parent is doing their best to love their children. But sometimes we actually are leading not with love, but with something that looks like love or feels maybe like love. I want to go to 1 John chapter 4 and look at verse 16 to 19. Now John, he was Jesus' closest friend. He probably was the person that understood Jesus better than anybody else here on earth. And this is what he says. We know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in his love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. So we will not be afraid in the day of judgment, but we will face him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in this world. Such love has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is not for fear of punishment, and this shows, it is for fear of punishment, and this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. We love each other because he first loved us, or loved us first. So, if we have not fully experienced God's love, either directly from God or through other people, including our parents, then it's very easy to mistake fear for love. And fear in parenting will lead you down destructive roads. You don't want to parent in panic. You don't want to parent even in anxiety. You don't want to parent with that sense of inner gnawing at you all the time. And yet that is the reality for many of us. And certainly I was there many times, and sometimes again still come into that position as I relate to our kids. Many of us parent in fear, thinking that it's love. And that is very risky. And there's basically two large categories of ways in which fear in parenting can play out. So the first one is well, let's just name it for what it is. It's cruelty. Now, it's not intentional, of course, but we are anxious about what our kids are doing. We feel intimidated. We don't know how to respond to the situation. And so we clamp down on our kids in a form that's cruel. Now, we don't see it in the moment, of course. It would probably take an outsider to see the fact that it's cruel, because it's driven by concern for them. It's driven by this sense of anxiety for what they are about to do or doing, and how we need to just rein this in this moment. I want you to listen to what C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis is the guy that wrote the Narnia Chronicles. So he says this about this situation. He says that he has been far more impressed by the bad manners of parents to children than by those of children to parents. Parents are seen to treat their children with an incivility which, offered to any other young people, would simply have terminated the acquaintance. They're dogmatic on matters the children understand and the elders don't. They impose ruthless interruptions, flat contradictions, ridicule of things the young take seriously, and make insulting references to their friends. This provides an easy explanation to the questions: why are they always out or in their room? Why do they like every other house better than our house? Who, Lewis inquires, does not prefer civility to barbarism? Well, that's kind of a stark way of putting it. But he's basically tapping on this sense of lashing out at our kids, which we sometimes do when we feel out of control. Now, the other direction that it can go, and this is probably more common now in our culture, is to let go of all boundaries with your kids, where you just pull back and go, whoa, I'm not going to do anything that will in any way jeopardize the happiness of my kids in this particular moment. And so we bend over backwards for our kids, and we become their servants. So we were jumping at their every beck and call. When they say jump, we say how high. Kind of a relationship with our kids. And this is very fear-driven, although parents, we wouldn't necessarily see it that way. We would see it as being driven by love. The problem is when you allow this kind of fear to take you down that road, and you allow your kids to basically become your masters or your boss, you lead them towards entitlement. And kids then start to feel like this is the way the world is supposed to work. I am supposed to be able to tell people around me how to treat me. And what I want right now matters more than what anybody else wants. And of course, that doesn't work very well once you get into the adult world and get a job and so on and so forth. You know, we used to talk about helicopter parenting, where parents are hovering around their kids, making sure that, you know, everything is good for them. Well, this helicopter parenting is now being replaced by something called lawnmower parenting. So lawnmower parenting, you're not just hovering around your kids, you're actually mowing down anything that could upset them in any way, shape, or form before they get there. So this kind of parenting is the parenting where the parents actually make an appointment with the person doing the job interview before their child comes in to do the job interview, so that they can tell the person doing the job interview how to treat their child. Or the principal at the school, or the teacher at the school, or the leader at the youth group, or this or that, this other person. Anybody basically that interacts with their child needs to be prepped on how their child likes to be treated. So you have a situation where parents now believe that this is good parenting. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't love our children, not at all, but that's not really loving your child. That's being afraid of your child. Afraid of anything that might make them in any way sad. And that can lead to disaster. How many of you have heard of a guy named Chuck Swindoll? He's a preacher from the States. Yeah, a few of you that are old like me. And he talks about, he gives I think it's a 9-step process in how to train your child to be a delinquent. So, step number 1, when your kid is still an infant, give him everything he wants. This way he'll think the world owes him a living when he grows up. Number 2, when he picks up swearing and off-color jokes, laugh at him, encourage him. As he grows up, he will pick up even cuter phrases that will floor you. Number 3, never give him any spiritual training. Wait until he's 21 and then let him decide for himself. Number 4, avoid using the word wrong. It will give your child a guilt complex. You can condition him to believe later, when he is arrested for stealing a car, that society is against him and he is being persecuted. Number 5, pick up after him. His books, his shoes, his clothes. Do everything for him so he will be experienced in throwing all responsibility onto others. Number 6, let him read all printed matter he can get his hands on and watch anything on TV or the internet. You sterilize the silverware, but let him feast on any kind of garbage he wants to. Number 7, satisfy his every craving for food and drink and comfort. Every sensual desire must be gratified. Denial may lead to a harmful frustration. Number 8, give your child all the spending money he wants. Don't make him earn anything on his own. Why should he have things as tough as you did? And then number 9, take his side against neighbors and teachers and policemen. They're always in the wrong. So those are some ways that we can parent in fear. Obviously, they're extreme, but you get the drift here. See, genuine love, we read in this passage, is not driven by fear. We're not driven by the fear of losing the love of our children. That's very, very important. And we're not driven by the fear of failing as a parent in some way. We are driven by what's best for our child in the long run. That's the motivator of true love. And sometimes when our own inner emotions are in turmoil, we can't necessarily discern that, which is why it's important sometimes to just kind of slow down and think before you act. And see, if I feel a need to have my child always like me, I won't parent well. That is fear, not love. Here's the thing. Love is confident and humble, not harsh or needy. And this is why we need Jesus in our parenting. Jesus can provide that sense of love that leads to confidence and humility. His love can actually move us from harsh or neediness to love and confidence and humility. And I believe one of the best expressions of this confidence is something called reality discipline. Reality discipline is where you imagine for your child what the reality of an adult world would respond like to their behavior. So if your child is acting irresponsibly, what would that lead to as an adult? For example, not showing up at school. What does that translate into in not showing up at work? It usually doesn't work well. And so we help our children see that this is not the way the world works. This is the way the world works. If you do this, negative consequences are the result. And so we can't shield ourselves from the negative consequences of the real world, because that in the long run actually is a disfavor to our children. It makes it harder for them to adjust to reality as an adult. And it's not punishment. We're not going after our kids in a cruel, kind of a harsh way, where we're trying to sort of make life miserable for them. We're helping them in a loving environment understand the way the real world works. This, I believe, is confident, humble, loving parenting. And that's what we need to do, especially in this information overload kind of culture. Because that is something that just a lot of information can't help them with. Understanding how the real world works is something that only experience can teach us. And experience is something you have more of than your children, believe it or not. How many of you have more experience than your kids? Yeah? Okay. This is a gift you can help them with. It's a beautiful gift you can help them with if you do it in a loving way. And see, the interesting thing is, your children will ultimately follow the person they feel the most love from. This is critical. Not the most fear from. And I've had parents tell me, later on when their kids rebelled and their relationships are broken down, where did I go wrong? And it's not like I understand always what the issues are, but there are times where I can see that you parented in fear and you thought it was love and you did your best. But out of that fear of hurting your child or whatever, you gave them whatever they wanted and you thought that was the loving thing to do. And now they've found somebody else that actually loves them more than you because you treated them with fear. And so Jesus calls us to a place of loving our children confidently and humbly. And that then enables us to be the people that they will want to go to as adults even, to find that sense of connection with. You want that person to be you as their parents. I'll share with you a little secret here. The truth is, your kids actually don't really care how much you know or how much you don't know. See, truth and information and knowledge is so, it's such a overload for them that it's losing its value. You don't really have to be that smart to be a great parent. And our kids get that. They are not looking for you to be smarter than them. They are looking for you to love them. Now, in my generation, we actually valued, education and success and all of those things more. We were actually a lot dumber than the kids today because we thought, my parents don't know diddly, so I can't listen to them. Kids today, actually, they get it, that information in and of itself is not the answer. They're looking for something deeper. So don't be intimidated when they know more than you do. You've got something they want. You've got love, and if you can deliver your experience or wisdom with love, you have got allies in your kids. This is very good news. Let me just throw this in as an extra on the side. It's interesting to me that our faith in Jesus is not based on knowledge. You're not a better Christian because you know more about Jesus. If that were the case, then the people that have theology degrees would be the best Christians in the world. But that's not the case. The reality is our faith in Jesus, the strength of our faith is based on relationship. The more we embrace and receive His love, the deeper our relationship grows and the more we grow in our faith. And this is exactly the same way it works with our kids. It's not about how much you know. It's not about how much they know. It's not about how little you know. It's about how much love really penetrates every aspect of your parenting. And that love ultimately comes from Jesus. So here's the great news. As a follower of Jesus, you have access to the greatest source of love in the world. So that resources you as a follower of Jesus to be the best parent in the world. This is very good news. So there was a lady named Susanna a few years ago, quite a few years ago now. She had 19 children. And she homeschooled all 19 children. She wasn't from Newfoundland. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. And Susanna's husband was actually away a lot for work. So she was basically a single parent to these 19 children. And Susanna Wesley was her last name. She was a very organized person, but she determined to take a half an hour every week, one-on-one time with every one of her children. And you just think about that. That's about an hour and a half every day, just one-on-one with about three of your kids. Now, of course, some of them were already moved out before the youngest ones were born. But when her children moved out, she actually took that half an hour that she had spent with them every week and prayed for every one of her children. And so instead of face-to-face, she was face-to-face with God on their behalf. And those kids loved and revered their mom, who was basically a single mom, with a deep, deep sense of honor and grace. And two of her sons, John and Charles, actually became traveling evangelists. And out of their ministry grew a whole new denomination called the Methodist Church. Some of you may have heard of the Methodist Church. In Canada, that's now become part of the United Church. But in other parts of the world, there still are Methodist churches. And there actually are a few Methodist churches still in Canada as well that didn't become part of the United Church. But Charles and John especially spoke very, very highly of her. How did Susanna do it? She allowed the love of Jesus that changed her heart to flow through her to her kids. You know, parenting today is very intimidating. But the truth is, parenting has always been intimidating. But the good news is, Jesus is the best source of the key ingredient to good parenting in the whole universe. And you have access to him. He actually promised he'd be with you. He'd never leave you or forsake you. And it's a beautiful thing. So if there's anything I have to say to you today is, you can do this. Parenting, as intimidating as it is, you can do this. Jesus will help you. He will be with you every step of the way. And if you're in a situation this morning where you don't even really know whether you have a relationship with Jesus or not, today is a great day to start a relationship with him. He's just waiting for you. And so if you're in a position where you've never invited Jesus to come in and connect at a deep heart level with you, why don't you do that today? I'm going to ask the prayer team to stand right over here by that mirror and the cross. And as we finish up the service here this morning, if you're in a position where you would like to start a relationship with Jesus and access this parenting help, why don't you just slip out of your seat, go over and chat with one of them, and they will walk you through how to invite Jesus into that place. And if you are already in a relationship with Jesus, I'd like to give you practical advice. It's one thing to be loved, it's another thing to recognize that you are loved. Sometimes we easily take each other for granted. If you've been married a few years, you might understand what I'm talking about. I'd like to challenge you this morning to try this just for a week and see how this goes. Every day, at some point during your day, stop long enough to allow your mind to think of one new way that Jesus loves you that you've never thought of before. So it might come quickly, it might take a little while, but just stop whatever you're doing and just open your mind to think about a fresh way in which Jesus loves you. Because as you open your heart and mind to think about that, it fills you with love. And then I'd like to challenge you to let that love that you are absorbing, if you will, or soaking in, to trickle out to your kids or grandkids. So that's your challenge for this week. You can do this. Jesus will help. You just need to allow some space there. Okay? So Rodney and Michelle here are going to close us off. And they're going to have lunch down here in a second with new people. But if you're in that position where you want to start a relationship with Jesus, please do that before you leave.